Welcome to this installment of Petite to Queen's Success at Work Virtual Mentoring Series. Today's topic is telecommuting, how to work from home. On our webinar today, we have co-founders and CEOs Tina Olson.
Hello.
Myself, and our Director of Operations and Communications, Rachel.
Hi there.
So we're going to get started with, is telecommuting right for you? And Tina, would you like to get us started?
Sure. You know, I've worked at home for many years, and it happens to be a great fit for me. But some of the questions that people want to ask, while it sounds great to be able to not have to get out and be on the car and or the train and take transportation to get somewhere, but there's some really key things to think about when deciding whether or not working from home is right for you. You know, do you like a flexible schedule, or do you really prefer to have a fixed time that you go to work between certain hours? Are you self-organized? Are you all right working alone, or do you prefer to have face-to-face collaboration? Or do you work well independently, or do you like, again, that collaboration with others? And what happens with distractions? How do you work through those distractions? Is it quieter in office, or is your workspace conducive at home to being able to conduct work? And another is that do you have dedicated workspace? And the main thing is, can you really self-motivate? Are you an individual that can really keep yourself motivated and keep the tasks at hand and be able to wipe out those distractions without having an office to go in and out of? So we're looking at that physical space. Do you have enough area around you? Do you enjoy working alone? And working alone means being self-motivated and having that time management, that discipline to really get the job done. So Lynn, what do you think?
Well, like you, I've been telecommuting for some time. I eased into telecommuting early on because of circumstances. After changing companies, I lived a long ways from the office, and I had the opportunity to work from home for part of the time, and I started doing that. I made phone calls and I prepped work at home in the morning, and then when I went into the office, my actual commute time was much better because of the traffic. And it was a great way for me to have that initial transition to work from home and see how it worked for me. And often there are companies that will allow you to telecommute for 1 day a week or 1 day a month. And that's a great way to dip your toe in the water and to see if it's right for you. Rachel, what are your thoughts?
Well, you know, I've also been telecommuting for about the last year, and I think these are really important questions to ask yourself, because I've found that I actually really don't enjoy telecommuting. As much as it sounds nice, like Tina said, to be able to just get up and stay in your pajamas and get to work, it doesn't quite work for me. I don't have a dedicated physical space, so I'm alternating between my own bedroom and the dining room. And these are really important things to look at. And I also really like working with other people. So yeah, telecommuting isn't actually a good fit for me. I think it's okay to admit that to yourself. It's not for everyone, and it's not really for me. So here you have an example of someone who's, I consider, a pretty good worker, but just isn't great with telecommuting. And Tina, do you have any additional thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. You know, one of the things to keep in mind too is, as we evaluate whether or not it's right to be working at home, is have you been with that particular company long enough to be able to still blend in with their culture, and are you well established there so that you know how to communicate and keep in touch with that central office? And also, is it right for you? Is it right for your family? If you have a family or roommates or whatever your living situation is that going to be supportive of your desire to be working at the house? Is that really going to work out for everyone? And then obviously, and I think we'll continue to talk about this, is it, when you do decide to work from home, we need to keep that really healthy work-life balance. Lynn?
Perfect conclusion. And we're going to move on to tools and tips, and I'll get this started. So, how to set up your home office? I mean, that's a big question that many people have, and it's going to vary greatly based on the support and equipment provided by your company. The obvious requirements are, though, that you have high speed internet. You should upgrade your service and for your speed and accessibility. So you have the ability to move large files, have virtual meetings, have video virtual meetings. All of that takes a lot of bandwidth. So be mindful of that. On the equipment level, it's pretty obvious you're going to need a laptop, because if you're telecommuting, there would be times when you're going to need to either go into a satellite office or to some other work site environment, and you'll need to be able to take your work with you. And I do say, not everyone, there obviously there could be situations where you don't require a laptop, but some other type of computer, and with secure access to your company folders and system. And with many companies, that's going to be provided for you. But if you have to provide your own, make sure it's compatible with your organization's systems and can easily network in so that you can work easily. All right. So the next thing is your organization. And I think one thing to think about here is when you're looking at your office space, be cognizant of the fact that you're going to be having video meetings, and you want to make sure that what they're seeing doesn't look like the back of a laundry room, right? I'll laugh at, that's one of the changes that not that it was the back of my laundry room, but that I actually had to make, because back in the day, we didn't have video conferences. And what my office looked like didn't really matter. And that was a change that I had to make to reorganize my space so that when people are looking through the camera and they see the rest of my space, that they're seeing something that's conducive to a positive uh, perception of my work space and habits. So I think another thing that you have to think about when you're about organization is just like the little pictures, how you're going to organize your desk. Do you have the type of general office supplies you need? And once again, many of these may be provided by your company, but that's something you're going to need to look into. I would highly recommend having a headset with a mic, because when you're doing these conference calls, you're going to sound so much clearer, and it's going to be like you're in the room. And it's, once again, creating a really strong perception that it's easy to hear and understand you, and that you're part of the team, that you're engaged, and you're doing your work. And I've got this on here about logistics. And this is one of the things that you do need to keep in mind from the perspective, if you do need supplies and those supplies are coming from your company, what's that timeline look like? You could be working on the East Coast and your corporate headquarters are on the West Coast, and that's where they ship materials from. So if you need brochures, if they fulfill your office supply needs, just be mindful of that so that you have that timeline. And another thing is, when you do travel to a satellite office, potentially to a meeting with a client or meetings with other satellite coworkers, potentially going to the airport. Once you start working at home, you lose sight of what the standard traffic patterns are, and that can really put a wrench into your day if you miss a flight or something, right? So the last thing I'm going to talk about here is limiting distractions. Tina definitely alluded to that, so did Rachel, and this is so important. If you're in a meeting, if you're on a call, if you just have your head down and you need to complete a project, you need to be very cognizant about what your environment is around you, because that is going to impact the perception that your coworkers, your management, your supervisors have over your performance. If they sense that you've got a lot of distractions, let alone that it means that you're not going to be able to be very focused and get your work done. So, Tina, what are your thoughts here on this, the tools and tips?
Well, I think you've covered quite a few of them. Obviously, you need the right equipment, and you've got to have the right speed. Your telephone, the idea of having a headset, kind of that, and that's not just for yourself, but also to block out any other noises that someone else might be hearing. And I think that really the key here are the key is to really be disciplined with your time. And to consider the fact that when you go into whatever that physical office space is, that you are in that mindset that yes, this is my office, and this is where I work, and you set a schedule for yourself. In As opposed to going to the water cooler and having conversations with people, you can schedule time to talk with your coworkers via phone. But you can stay connected in that way. But it's really important to set very clear boundaries on your office space and where you, this is my office, and then when you leave, if it's a room, you close the door, or you just put that out of your mind that that's not, I've left my office. It is completely a mindset, and don't allow yourself in any capacity to get sidetracked by something that maybe that you think needs to be done in the house. That's because if you were in an office, you would not be turning around and taking care of something within the house. So as much luxury as it gives you to be flexible and autonomous, it is also, to your point, you really need to limit those distractions in order to be effective. Another thing to keep in mind, particularly if during the course of your day you're working with clients or you have clients coming to work with you, make sure that your workspace is conducive and that it fits within whatever. If you're in a condominium, for instance, you want to be sure that there's plenty of parking, that having clients coming to your home isn't going to be problematic for your neighbors. It's something that we don't really think about until after we get involved in that. But just keep in mind of your physical space and your neighbors as well. Rachel?
Right. I think both Lynn and Tina did a good job here. I think that the only thing I would add is that in terms of organization, I know Lynn talked about being able to be presentable on video calls and have a professional looking background and having the right tools and supplies. But I think another thing, to speak more to Tina's point about not getting distracted, which she really focused on there, is that having an organized and uncluttered and, I don't know, tidy workspace is going to be very conducive to your own mindset. It'll feel more like you're at work and not at home when you have all kinds of personal things scattered around you. Um, and that'll help limit your distractions, but it'll also put you in the right mindset, which I'll get to at a later slide, to really get to work. So being organized is helpful in a lot of different ways. So Tina, I know that you're going to be taking on the next slide here.
I am, and that is on maintaining visibility. So as great as it is to be out and having your own workspace and being able to work from home, the fact that you are limiting those distractions, we still need to figure out the way to stay in touch and still feel part of a team, and continue to have a relationship with your coworkers. And those coworkers may be working virtually as well. So it's important to set up those times to hey, let's have a coffee break and we can chat, or something that you're doing over the phone, or perhaps via a GoToMeeting or something where you can have a conversation with your coworkers. And also to be sure that that company culture, again, I think I mentioned it earlier, that the company culture is supportive of telecommuting, and is has the procedures in place and the policies in place that make it easy um, to be effective when you're working from home. And want to be sure that if there are meetings that take place at the office, that you are included. People remember to include. Oh, I forgot, because you're working out of your house. Well, no, you're part of the team, and make sure that you are on all of those email strings, and that if there is an internal conference, that you're included on that. And sometimes that takes a little more diligence on your part to do, because sometimes out of sight, out of mind, people don't. It's not necessarily they're excluding you. It's just that they're not thinking to make that additional step of inviting you. So be sure you're aware of, and that's really your responsibility, I feel, is to make sure you're aware of whatever is happening internally. Part of that is keeping a regular schedule, and you know that you're taking your rest breaks, but you're also you have a set schedule, and you stay to it, and you kind of get a rhythm going for working. So you have a schedule and you're staying with it. So I would say that those are my ideas. But the maintaining the visibility is, just because you're not in an office doesn't mean that people cannot remember, and a lot of times that's your responsibility to be sure that you're included. And sometimes there may be a meeting that's large enough that you feel that maybe you need to be present. Just because you're working outside of the office and you have a home office doesn't mean that providing it's within driving distance or transportation wise, or maybe it is that you're working for a company that is in another state. If it's an important enough meeting, then perhaps it's important enough then for you to fly in and to be able to do that. It's always important to have face-to-face conversations and develop those relationships, so that when you are working off-site, you can rely upon that collaboration and that relationship that you've developed. Lynn?
I agree. The foundation that you create with your coworkers is really important when you're telecommuting. And to your point, Tina, one-on-one phone calls, it's a great way to make those connections and to maintain them. This same thing with what I've already mentioned, having video calls so that you can see each other on those calls.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure you've got scheduled update meetings, so that, to your point, Tina, you are involved and engaged and you're aware of what's happening, and that you make presentations and updates within the structure of those update meetings. And those, of course, can be done, via the internet and a presentation, just like we're doing here right now, so that you are staying connected and they're seeing the materials and the work that you're doing as you move forward. So, Rachel, what are your thoughts on maintaining visibility?
Well, I think you, Lynn, and Tina both really covered everything that, well, maybe, probably, I'm sure not everything. The list is quite long, I'm sure. But I think you did a really good job of covering what's important here. And I just know that it's a lot, in my experience, it's easier to maintain visibility in a company where everyone is telecommuting than in a company where most people are actually at the office. So you do need to be mindful of how much effort. And of course, I think Lynn is right that you should always have a phone conversation with each of your each of your team members at least once a week, just to maintain that relationship, as Tina was talking about. And that's going to be very helpful to making sure that people don't forget about you and what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And from here, I'm going to go on to the next slide, which is self-motivation. So I know I mentioned in the past, as in a couple of slides ago, that I'm not super great with telecommuting. I mean, I get my work done, but it's more of a struggle for me than if it would be if I was just going straight into the office. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how to self motivate, especially when it's a little bit more of a struggle. Um, so of course you need to be in the right mindset to get to work. So I mentioned how you can just roll out of bed in your pajamas and you get to work, and that's very comfortable. But that's also not, I'm sure for a lot of people, conducive to feeling like you're at work. When you're at home, you are tempted, or at least I've been tempted, like, well, my bed is so close, I could just go back to bed and work a little bit later. You have chores and pets that want your attention. There are a lot of things that would get in your way, and you need to make sure that you're in the mindset that you are at work during your work hours. Whatever you decide your work hours may be, depending on what works for your company, you need to make sure that you are aware that this is work time, not play with the pet time. So, I know that in the past, Tina has talked to me about how she would get dressed and do her makeup and then go down to her home office.
Mm-hmm.
Could she have been in her pajamas? Yes, no one would have seen that. But for her, it really helped make her feel like she was at her office because she was. Sometimes you need to listen to the right kind of music just to get yourself a little pumped and a little less sleepy. Whatever it is that you need to do, you need to make sure that you're in that mindset. And you also need to focus, which I know we've talked about in the past. I keep saying in the past like it was years ago. I mean like a few minutes ago. Um, there are a lot of distractions, especially when you're at home. I mentioned the pets, I mentioned your own bed. Um, and without direct supervision, people can't really see when you're maybe wasting a little bit of time, but you need to find a way to focus on the work that you're doing. It's what's going to help you remain efficient, and people are going to trust your work and feel good about you. So you have to find a way to focus, maybe meditate for 10 minutes before you start your workday. In the past, when I was not telecommuting, but when I was working hard on a project, I found that listening to music from video game boss battles, like when you're fighting a major enemy, that music is designed to keep you focused. So sometimes I would listen to that to make myself focus, and that can help. Just do what you need to do. Keep your desk clear, whatever it is. Make sure that you can maintain your focus and not get distracted by all the things that are in your home, which are presumably a lot of things you enjoy. And finally, you need to keep in mind your objectives. You have things to do for your company, and you have responsibilities. So keep a list or keep a calendar, any way that's going to work for you. Set up notifications to remind you, or a checklist so you can feel like you're accomplishing things. And if that's not enough, which sometimes it might not be, remind yourself why you're doing each of the things that you're doing, why the task is important for yourself, for your company. And that's really going to help you feel like you're contributing even when you don't see your coworkers every day. And that's going to be very helpful to your motivation. So those are the tips that I would offer up initially. And I'm going to pass it back to Tina for her comments.
Well, thank you. And I think both of you have had some really good ideas there. Motivation, it really is a personal thing, isn't it? It's really, motivation is what excites us and what makes us want to move forward. It pushes us to achieve our goals and to improve ourselves, right? That's self-motivation, and it's something that is internal, and it's a personal drive to achieve and be in desire to improve ourselves and to meet standards and be committed to those goals. And it's taking that initiative, that readiness to go on and act on opportunities. And it's also optimism. Self-motivation, boy, you just really need to be your very own champion. And we talk about celebrating our wins and little just little things. If I that setting smaller goals during the day so that you keep knowing that you're going to be motivated, or you give yourself, you say, okay, something is going to be out there when I at the end of the day I'm going to be able to go take a jog, or I'm going to be able to go take a long walk in the park. That's going to be my reward for a job well done. Um, but it's very different for everyone. It's a very personalized to stay self motivated, and it's difficult. It really is, and to the point that it's a mindset, it's a focus, and you have objectives, and you celebrate yourself. Um, and it's for some people it's a struggle, and for others it's very fulfilling when you know that you have pushed yourself and you've done this on your own. Lynn?
I would add that routine. A routine is very important
Mm-hmm.
to staying motivated and also to this whole topic of being able to telecommute successfully and having a routine. And I also get up every morning, get dressed, and come down to like work. And I find it I I'm it works better for me now. And there are times where I have to get up earlier because I have a call with some other part of the country or another country, and I'm actually the hours are a little weird, and so then I am in Rachel's point, I'm in my jammies, and then I have to go up and change later. But having a set routine for as many days as possible is very important, and it keeps you in the same structure that you would have, and it really helps me with that motivation because I've got that routine, and I can prioritize my activities for the day, and I keep that running calendar of what are my daily uh, tasks and projects that need to be completed the weekly and the month excuse me, and the monthly, so I can see that as I move along. All right. Well, I think we're ready to move to our next slide, which is about work-life balance. And we've been talking about this so much, but I'm going to say it again. It requires self-discipline to achieve work-life balance, and you have to stop apologizing and feeling guilty. You need to be able to spend time with family and friends, and you need sometimes to actually work through the weekend on a critical project. So that's what this whole thing is about, finding that balance. And for me, I really struggled with that early on. When I converted to telecommuting full time, I would work all night. It's just like there was always work, and I could always go down into my den and work. So what I had to do was set work hours, just like I would if I was in the office. And I would schedule my days and my activities. And the other thing I did is I reserved time that was for myself and for my family and for my friends. And I took the time to meet my coworkers, even though I was working off site, and my friends for like a coffee, so we could catch up, and we had some of that social interaction, or maybe it was a meal or an excursion. And just like if you were in the office, when you're talking around the water cooler, it wasn't always work related. It could be non-work related, and certainly if it was friends and I was having a lunch break, it would be non-work related. And those were really some of the key tools that helped me get through that transition as to when I was telecommuting full time, so I wasn't working all the time. And Tina, I know that you've done a lot to find that balance between work and life, and I'd love to hear how you succeeded.
Well, thank you, Lynn. Um, work-life balance, it's a number of different things. I mean, yeah, obviously we've talked about setting boundaries, and we've talked about being prepared, but it's also very important to give yourself permission to kind of step aside. And if things just get to be overwhelming, or you find that just because you are working from home doesn't mean that you cannot step outside and take a coffee break or take a walk or make other phone calls. It's that ability to kind of go in and out of it. And again, some people like working from the house. I happen to like it, but I also schedule things outside of the office. I schedule meetings so that it's not that I'm completely isolated. I'll make luncheon meetings. I will have other offsite meetings, schedule different. I like to have a really good blend of things that I do during the day. And sometimes I just give myself permission not to do something in the evening, or just because I will allow it to move to the next day. It's important to be able to unplug when you're working within your home, particularly to realize that just because there's something still on your to-do list, if you actually were in an office and you knew you had to leave by a certain time, you would do that, and that item would still be on your to-do list in the morning. It's important to think about that. It's also so important for us to get out, get some sort of exercise and breathe. Some folks like to meditate and be able to, they find their release that way. I like to play the piano. That helps me relieve some of my stress during the day. But when you work at home, it is so easy to get caught up in the fact that there's always something more to do. That's right. There's always something more to do. But just you need to remember that there are multiple components that make us ourselves and make us individuals, and to be kind to yourself, and allow that there's work, and then there's the rest of your life, and many times they're intersecting with each other, but you need to give yourself time to just to decompress. Rachel?
Right. I think that one of the hazards of working from home, which I've mentioned, is that sometimes it can feel like your work and your personal life and tasks start to bleed into each other. You do laundry in the middle of the workday between a couple of tasks. You're answering emails at home when you're in the evening when you're watching a movie. And these things really start to blend together. And the difference between work time and personal time, they stop being divided. And that seems unhealthy to me. So I think what Lynn and Tina have been talking about here, setting up your boundaries, and as Tina said, like when the workday is over, it's okay if there are still some things on your to-do list. Just do them in the morning, like you would if you were in a real office, um, an on-site office. And I think that you're not. I don't see how it would be possible to achieve a good work-life balance if you don't have work time and personal time being separate instead of bleeding together. And I think I'm going to end my thoughts there.
Well,
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
was going to say, that in this day and age of everything being just a click away or a telephone call away, and we have our computers and we have our cell phones, and we are so ultra connected that it makes that work life balance just blurred. And sometimes we need to take control of that, and it's really an individual thing, but to step aside from all the technology and just breathe, and figure out what that time or what that looks like for you, so that you don't get so caught up, because it's so easy to do, is to continually be checking devices, and like, just back to Lynn's point about always having a schedule, right, and to be disciplined in that. And I think that it is possible to have a work-life balance, but it's really up to you to create that.
Yeah, absolutely. You do need to work at it. And so let's move on to thanking everyone, our members and guests who joined us for this installment of Success at Work virtual mentoring series, and for being a part of the dialogue here at Petite to Queen. If you have a question or would like to suggest topics for discussion, please email us at jointheconversation@petitetoqueen.com.